Shana Tova. Imagine that you've never experienced a sunset before. All you've ever known is a bright sky, blazing sunshine, and the world bathed in light. Then one day, the sun seems to fade from the sky. Everything starts to slowly grow duller and darker. The color seeps out of everything. The world turned an intense gray and then black. Your sight begins to dim. You squint and tremble as you realize that your ability to see is fading. You have no idea what's happening, and you cry out in fear, thinking either the world or your existence is coming to an end. According to one midrash, or story on Genesis, this is how Adam, the first human ever created, experienced the first sunset. He had no idea that nighttime existed. And when it arrived, he was terrified. He cried out, "Darkness will envelop me." And God responded. God prepared 2 stones of flint, and Adam struck them together, creating fire for the very first time. Adam recited a blessing over the fire, acknowledging the miracle of being able to see in the dark. As we reach the end of 5784, I have at times felt like Adam during that first sunset. The darkness in our world is overwhelming and ever deepening. Whether I'm fearful and heartbroken about the devastating effects of war on the lives of Israelis and Palestinians, the climate crisis, or the tenuousness of our own democracy, the tsuris, the pain and suffering of the world, has a way of leaching the color from everything. But on Rosh Hashanah, we are invited to celebrate the color in our world, to celebrate creation. Tomorrow, we will sing together the words, Hayom Harat Olam. This is often translated as, today the world is born. But the more accurate translation is something like, today the world is conceived. The verb hara means to conceive or to become pregnant. On Rosh Hashanah, the world is not yet born. The year is yet to be, pregnant with potential and possibility. There is both an inherent fear and an excitement in facing the year ahead. As Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld puts it, standing precisely at the threshold of the world that could be. And while fear feels very accessible right now, I also want to imagine possibility. I want to imagine not only the darkness that Adam experienced, but also the light. What was it like for Adam to go from terror and despair to experiencing the brilliance of light amidst darkness? What was he feeling when he saw those glittering flecks and those sparks of fire? When the fuzzy edges of the trees around him grew into focus once more? Or when he felt the warmth radiating from the flames? And how can we, in our own world of darkness, find sparks? In the words of activist Adrienne Marie Brown, how do we prepare not just for suffering, but for sharing and for innovation? My immediate answer is, I don't know. Good luck to all of us. Shana Tova, and good night. And while that might make our service a little bit shorter, Judaism doesn't let us get away with easy answers. So I went spelunking through our sacred texts, and I came up with at least a few ideas worth sharing. We can look to the past for hope. When, as we'll chant in tomorrow's Torah reading, Abraham tied Isaac to the altar, his knife raised in the air, about to sacrifice his only son, God intervened, a ram appeared, and Isaac lived. When our ancestors stood at the shore of the sea, looking behind them at the Egyptians closing in and in front of them at the Sea of Reeds, feeling utterly and impossibly stuck, the sea split, and they made it through. When our people experienced the destruction of the Second Temple, closely following the destruction of the First Temple, a small group of leaders went back to our sacred texts and created a new vision of Jewish life. Our communal gathering place and religious center was reduced to rubble, but Judaism continued. As Rabbi Emma Kipley-Ogman, Jewish chaplain at McAllister, wisely said recently, there has not yet been a year when before saying Slichot, the prayers that start our high holidays, human beings have all been safe and our hearts have been fully settled. But we have always made it through. We have always made it through. We have always made it through, and we will make it through again. And when we lack the strength to even believe that we can make it through, we can look for our own pieces of flint so that we can make a spark. We can remember the good. A story from prophets recounts how the priest Ezra gave a Rosh Hashanah pep talk to despairing and weepy Israelites. He says to them, "Go, eat choice foods and drink sweet drinks and share with whoever has none, for the day that is Rosh Hashanah is holy to God. Do not be sad, for your rejoicing in Adonai is the source of your strength." Although telling people do not be sad is not the pastoral or the empathetic approach that I would practice or recommend, I nevertheless hear Ezra sharing some important advice here. He says, rejoicing in Adonai is the source of your strength. Or said differently, rejoicing in God's creations is the source of our strength. Rejoicing in the good, in people, in ourselves, in any small spark that is the least bit warming. These are the sources of our strength. In the interest of rejoicing in the good, let's remember that this year, a ridiculously adorable and overly energetic tiny hippopotamus named Mu Dang gave her handlers a hard time and gave the world some much-needed laughter when one of her zookeepers had the bright idea to share Mu Dang's antics online. Israeli researchers at Bar Ilan University collaborated with Italian researchers to discover a new way to intervene in the early stages of Alzheimer's. Their innovative therapy has demonstrated promising results in delaying disease progression by up to 36% in individuals with early to mild cognitive impairments. In its inaugural year, the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League, set 6 different attendance records, including a world record for attendance at a women's pro hockey game or women's hockey game, period, with over 21,000 fans at a game. And by the way, Minnesota won the championship and took home the prized Walter Cup. This year, maybe you bought a house with a person you love. Or maybe you finally found an apartment that doesn't have a mouse problem. Maybe you welcomed a new grandchild. Or maybe you brought home a new pet. Maybe you discovered a new passion or hobby. Or maybe you finally finished knitting that same pair of socks. Maybe you celebrated a job or a relationship milestone. Or maybe you just managed to hide under the covers a few days less. For as much as newness brings challenges, unexpected good comes along too. Octavia Butler writes, "There is nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns." We can keep a lookout for those new suns. And when we can't find them, we can make our own suns. In the Midrash about Adam experiencing darkness for the first time, it's not God that makes the fire, it's Adam. God gives Adam the flint, and Adam makes something from it. And Adam doesn't make a whole bonfire either. He creates a spark. When I moved into my apartment, I discovered that the one light switch in my hallway was very conveniently located, smack dab in the middle of the hallway. It was irritating enough that I kept grumbling to my friends about my landlord's unwise electrical choices, my propensity to trip over things, and my inability to see in the dark. And then after a few weeks of grumbling, a friend came over with a set of hooks, a spool of twinkly lights, and an idea. With a little maneuvering around a poorly placed outlet and a lot of perseverance, they lined the entire hallway with lights. While I was fixated on my lack of night vision, they created a solution that added not only light, but comfort and some twinkle. Suddenly, my apartment wasn't just more accessible, but cozier. Like Adam, and like my friend, we can engage in small acts of creation. These kinds of creative acts may not have the power to end wars or save us from climate disaster. And it is the sparks that create the light and the warmth that we need to survive. In our daily liturgy, we recite the phrase, "Hamechadesh betuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit." God creates the world anew each day. We too, created in the image of God, can create anew each day, even by starting small. We can finish knitting that pair of socks and hope for shleimut, for wholeness in our world. We can pull up the weeds in our garden and dream of a landscape less susceptible to natural disaster. We can write a new song or try a new recipe or build a new friendship in the hope and belief that sparks of joy are still possible to create in a dark world. In her poem On the Pulse of Morning, Maya Angelou writes, "Each new hour holds new changes for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change." This year, may we remember that we have made it through before. May we recognize the good. May we imagine and live into what does feel possible. May we give ourselves the push and permission to make the little things better, even when the big things seem out of our control. And may we continue to imagine a better world. Shana Tova.
What do we need to imagine? I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know from brokenness there's hope. Yes, I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do